In this video, I'm going to teach you a 5-step process that strategy consulting firms like McKinsey use to solve complex business problems. It's called hypothesis-based problem solving, and it's used by all the top consulting firms. In doing so, we will dive deep into the most powerful frameworks that they use and how you can use them too. But the best way to learn this is through an example. So here's the real business problem that we're going to tackle. We work for a SaaS company that provides CRMs for businesses. Monthly recurring revenue, or MRR, growth has fallen from 15% to 9%. What's causing it? So with that, we'll dive into the first technique, which is the day one answer. The best consulting firms, they never start with a blank page. They immediately form a hypothesis called the day one answer. Now, the day one answer is an early best guess solution to the business problem. It's not supposed to be 100% correct. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be a starting point. So let's look at our business problem. Monthly recurring revenue growth has fallen from 15% to 9%. What's causing it? So our day one answer might be something like, I think the client is not acquiring enough new customers and maybe lead gen is drying up. As I said, this is not necessarily 100% correct, it's not perfect, but it's an important starting point for a few different reasons. Now, the first reason is that strategy projects are fast-paced. Clients expect insights in weeks, not months, and the day one answer helps the consulting team prioritize what matters versus what doesn't matter and get to the answer faster. So that's the first reason. Now, the second reason is that most strategy problems are messy, they're unstructured. So what the day one answer does is it imposes structure on the chaos. It's like turning on a flashlight in a dark room. It might not show the whole path, but it does illuminate the first step. And the third reason is that it builds credibility with clients. Even on day one, a client will ask you, what do you think? And it's never right to not have an answer. So it's always good to have some view, even if that view changes over time. So that's our starting point. We believe that MRR growth has slowed down because lead gen is drying up. And now we have a pathway forward. So let's move to the next step, which is breaking down the problem. Once strategy consultants have a starting point, they break down the problem. And again, we'll start with our business problem, which is monthly recurring revenue growth has fallen from 15% to 9%. What's causing it? So the first thing we need to do is think through the different drivers of MRR. So there's many ways to break down this problem. We just need to pick one. And for me personally, the most sensible one is something like MRR equals new customer MRR plus existing customer MRR. So this makes sense to me because when you think about next month's MRR, it'll be made up of current customers that continue on or leave, plus new customers that join that month. So they're the two components of total MRR. And just by doing that, we've actually turned one problem into two different hypotheses. New customer MRR has fallen and existing customer MRR has fallen. Now we can actually continue to break these down. So we could break down new customer MRR into the number of new customers times the average deal size. So that's the mathematical breakdown of new customer MRR. And you could actually break this down even further if you wanted to. For example, you could break down the number of new customers into leads times by conversion rate. In this case, we won't do that. We'll stop here, but the point is that you can continue to break all of these things down even further. But now let's break down existing customer MRR. So my opinion, the best way to do this is to break it into expansion MRR. So these are things that grow MRR of existing customers, and churn MRR, which are the things that reduce MRR of existing customers. And let's keep going. So we'll break down expansion MRR into upgrades, which is a more expensive version of the same product, cross sells, which is selling a different product to an existing customer, and then price changes, which is selling the same version of the same product for a higher price to an existing customer. And we'll do the same thing for churn MRR, but in this case, again, I'll go mathematical. I think the best way to break down churn MRR is number of customers lost times by the average customer size. So as I said, again, there are many, many ways to break this down, and there's not necessarily a right answer. You have to find the one that works for you, and this one works for me. But by going through this process of breaking down the problem, we've actually turned our original 2 hypotheses into a longer list of hypotheses. So that's actually quite helpful, and I'll explain why in a second. But what I want to mention first is, although it might look like creating these trees, which are called issue trees or hypothesis trees, it might look like it's easy, but actually it takes quite a lot of practice. The important thing though is I think it's one of the most, if not the most important skill in the consulting toolkit. So it's very, very useful to know how to do this well. But if you want to learn it and you want more detailed information about issue trees, the 4 different ways you can break them down, you want to work through more real examples, you can check out my strategy system, which I'll link to in the description below. But for now, we've finished our breakdown of the problem, so we have a comprehensive list of hypotheses that might explain why MRR growth has slowed from 15% to 9%. But we still don't know which of the hypotheses are true and which are false. So now we move to the next step, which is Heirarchy of Insight. As you may have guessed, we now need to figure out which of the hypotheses are true and do explain the slowdown in MRR growth, and which are false and do not. We do this through analysis, and this is critical because the bulk of a strategy engagement is about analysis. It's about pulling raw data, running analysis, and trying to figure out what actually happened. But I want to focus on something that really sets strategy consultants apart, and it's known as the Heirarchy of Insight. So imagine that there's a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid is the facts, and this is the raw data with no structure, no order. Above that is the summary, which is an organized restatement of the data. Then above that is the synthesis, and this is a description of the implication of the so what of the data. Early in my consulting career, I was told something by a partner that really stuck with me. He said, "A bad analyst will regurgitate the facts. A decent analyst will summarize the facts, but almost nobody will effectively synthesize the facts." And the thing that distinguishes a top strategy consultant from a firm like McKinsey and your typical corporate professional is their ability to frame their analysis in terms of what it means for the client and what it means for the specific business problem that they're tackling. So let's go back to our business problem, which is MRR growth has stalled from 15% to 9%. What's causing it? We might find that actually there's been no change in new customer MRR. We're still acquiring new customers at the same rate and of the same size as before. But in fact, there's been a slowdown in the growth of MRR coming from existing customers. So it turns out that our day one answer is not correct, so we need to revisit it. So as we just talked about, we just discovered that new customers aren't causing the slowdown in MRR growth. It's actually coming from existing customers. So that means we need to go back and revisit our answer with this new information and explore other hypotheses, ones that are focused on existing customers. This will happen again and again. So you'll run analysis, update your answer, run more analysis, update your answer. And as you iterate between answer and analysis, you'll slowly converge on the real state of affairs, what actually happened. So for our business problem, we might loop between analysis and answer and determine, actually, it turns out that there are 2 reasons why MRR growth has slowed. Now, one is fewer customers are upgrading their plans, and 2, larger customers are churning more than normal. So at this point, we've effectively solved our business problem. We know why MRR growth has slowed from 15 to 9%, but that's not the end, because strategy consultants recognize that it's not enough to solve the problem. You need to communicate that answer to your client in a persuasive way. In the corporate world, communication happens in PowerPoint in almost all cases, and strategy consultants are masters at creating compelling and persuasive PowerPoint presentations. And what they use is a framework called the SCR framework, and they use it to create a storyline for their presentations. So S is situation, C is complication, and R is resolution. So in our example, it might look like this. The situation is MRR growth has plateaued over the last 2 quarters. Then the complication might be, while new customer acquisition is steady, we're seeing fewer upgrades from existing customers and larger customers are churning more than usual. But what about the resolution? What does it actually mean? Well, let's put our analysis hat back on and think about synthesizing what we know. What does it mean for the client? So there's 2 things that we found. One is that fewer customers are upgrading their plans, and 2, that larger customers are churning more than normal. So when you put these 2 things together, it might imply that we're not meeting larger customers' needs, particularly as they grow. So the resolution could be something like, we're likely not meeting the needs of customers as they grow. Therefore, we should 1. Interview larger customers to understand their needs, 2. Conduct competitor analysis to identify feature gaps, and 3. Improve our high-end offering. These SCR storylines are really powerful, and they bring the reader on a journey that truly persuades them that you've solved their business problem. And I actually have a dedicated video on creating these McKinsey-style SCR storylines for any presentation. It's actually my most popular video, so I really recommend you check that out. I'll put it on the screen now.